Hello one and all, Jasper here, and you know what this video is about, so let's just jump right into it. A quick warning before we get started though, there may be minor spoilers in this video. I'm going to be talking about this episode in depth, obviously, but depending on the changes I may also make reference to future events that take place in the books if the choices made in the show will contradict those events, though that does not guarantee it will happen. An example is Leonor dies in the books, yet in the show he doesn't die and it's just a fake out. Maybe he'll come back, maybe he won't. Who can really say when the writers are fast and loose with what's written down in the books? Secondly, I will not be going over things that are not mentioned in the book, but also don't outright contradict what is written. For example, the scene where Damon and Rhaenys speak to one another. It isn't mentioned in the books, but it also does not contradict anything, so we're just going to go around it. Got it? Good. Then let's jump into it. Starting with the first scene, we have a quick lore addition that is never mentioned in the books anywhere that I'm personally not a fan of. Apparently the Starks draw lots to see who is sent to the Wall at the start of every winter. This is also not a punishment or a sentence, but an honor, and that is a heaping pile of bullshit. If it's an honor, then you wouldn't need to force people to join it with a damn lottery. Or am I to think that so many of the Starks want to join that to keep them all from running off, they have to participate in the lottery? At this point in history, the Night's Watch wasn't as much of a shit show as it is at the start of the original series, but it's still kinda fucked, as ever since Aegon the Conqueror took over the Seven Kingdoms, it had been steadily declining. It should be at about half strength compared to the peak of its power. Nobility probably would still be willing to join the Night's Watch without being forced to do so. It's kinda strange to add this aspect. I mean, even at its worst, you still had some nobility who joined it of their own accord, such as Jeor Mormont, Denys Mallister, and Wymar Royce. So why they would add this dumb tradition is odd, as at this point in history, there should be a handful of Starks who are perfectly willing to just join on their own accord. We see Jace having a meeting with Cregan Stark at the Wall. It should be noted that Cregan and Jace did not have such a meeting at the Wall. Instead, this was all done at Winterfell, where they bonded with one another on hunting, and possibly because Jace resembled a younger brother to the Lord Stark who had passed away. Another possible reason for the two becoming close in the books is Jace fell in love, allegedly, be clear about that, with Cregan's half-sister and was secretly wedded to her, though neither of these are mentioned. Some of the more corroborated information is also not mentioned, such as Jace agreeing that should he ever have a daughter, then she would be betrothed to Cregan's son. In the show, it's just about family and duty and honor. And this next part isn't exactly book inaccurate, but I do just want to get it off my chest. The actor for Cregan is dog shit. My man seems to be stuck on one tone and shows as much emotion as a bucket. I mean, this is almost as bad as the young Leonor actor. And don't give me the excuse that he is gloomy and stern like most Starks. Eddard and Jon were also stern characters who were able to have some fluctuation with their voices and show a hint of emotion. Cregan Stark also mentions that his father showed the late King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne the Wall. It is technically not impossible, but very unlikely. There is no mention of King Jaehaerys ever visiting the Wall himself, and when Queen Alysanne visited, Cregan Stark's father, Rickon Stark, wasn't even born yet, and was only 4 years old himself when she passed away of old age. And I don't think he'd be the best escort at that age, nor would the King and Queen be interested in visiting the Wall in their advanced age. If they did make a second trip to the Wall, and it just wasn't mentioned or written down, it would have had to have been either his grandfather, Benjen Stark, or even a later ancestor like Edric Stark or Alric Stark. Though it's hard to nail down, as these dates on when these guys were alive and dead can vary wildly. Next scene, we have Rhaenys returning from patrol, and Daemon wants her to join him in attacking King's Landing to kill Vhagar and Aemon, as facing them in a fair fight would likely mean his death. While it's possible this is book accurate, I want to say that it isn't because of how dumb this idea is, as it isn't just Aemond and Vhagar at King's Landing, but also Aegon and Sunfire, and Queen Helena with Dreamfire. though admittedly, Helena may not be much of a factor as she isn't exactly a warrior, nor does she really take any part in fights in the books. Either way, not even mentioning Aegon fighting beside his brother, even if he is, by comparison, a lesser threat, is ridiculous. Though considering how a particular battle will take place later in the book, it's very possible that this may have been the right tactical decision. But we can talk about that in a later episode. Next scene we're talking about is Corlys speaking with Alan. I won't go into detail about who he is, but I was surprised to see him in the show, and him mentioning his brother more specifically, as I thought with the sparing of Laenor that these two characters, at least Alan's brother Adam, would have been cut from the show. I'm curious and very skeptical about why they were kept, as having them around and keeping Laenor alive is very conflicting. So I'm curious about what the writers are going to do, but I don't have a lot of hope. But as far as inaccuracies go, this may surprise you, but Alan is not black. He is white and specifically Valyrian, so he'd have all the features such as the pale blonde hair and the purple eyes. Funny enough, when I was watching this for the first time, I looked at it and said, hey, that guy's definitely a Valyrian. I mean, he has so many qualities with the Velaryons. And then they said his name. Whew, I had to pause it and take a break from laughing after that. We do eventually see Criston Cole attending to Queen Alicent, making sure that her carpet is thoroughly cleaned. Subjectively, I hate this for now, but I will also throw in that there is not a single hint or mention of any sort of affair between Criston Cole and Alicent Hightower, so this was likely added for the sake of drama or to make sure that HBO can reach its recommended sex scenes. Some people say this was kind of hinted at with some sexual tension in the first season, but I don't remember that, and this is coming from the same fuckers who think that Jace and Cregan were having sexual tension at the wall, so good god, I think these people are just using the wrong head to think with, if you catch my drift. We then get a small council scene, for me, probably the second best in the episode, and it's very odd, however, that Larry Strong is not present. I don't know if the show was outright stated it yet, but Larys is or should be the Master of Whispers at this point, and thus should be at the small council meetings. The next moment of minimal importance is Rhaenyra arriving at the beach of where her son's dragon was discovered. This does not happen at all in the books, but I have to say it is a wonderful addition to the show. Aegon decides to hold court, sitting on the Iron Throne, and nothing here is worth commenting on except good old Hugh, the blacksmith. He actually does not live in King's Landing in the books, but Dragonstone, so him being in King's Landing is a bit of a surprise, but nothing groundbreaking. I mentioned this a few times in the previous season when I was going over it, but a small recap here seems appropriate, and then I'll not mention it again throughout the rest of the season. Alicent wanting to end the war with Rhaenyra still being alive by the end of it is a fantasy. The book character was perfectly willing to have her killed, and even though the show has made Alicent and Rhaenyra have a connection since a young age, Alicent thinking that such a situation is possible borders on insanity. Otto also says he wants the war to end with Rhaenyra's surrender and her living, but even if I think there is a kernel of truth, I more so believe he's also lying through his teeth. Ain't no way this guy thinks that's a good idea. Mysaria, the White Worm, is discovered stowing away on a ship, though I don't know if you can call it stowing away with how shit she is at hiding. But at this point in the books, she's still in King's Landing, and was not treated as a traitor or thrown into a dungeon by Daemon.
I want Aemond Targaryen.
Fuck me. That is her only line in this episode, but Emma knocks it out of the park with her acting. I may not care for the character of Rhaenyra herself, but Emma is not to blame at all. With this, we finally begin to reach the penultimate point of the episode, blood and cheese. Daemon speaks to Mysaria on if she has knowledge on who can complete this bloody task. First, at this point in the books, Daemon is not in Dragonstone actually. In fact, many of the tactical talks we see in both council meetings have already been enacted in one way or another. Whether the Greens or Blacks win, we'll find out later. Daemon's involvement in blood and cheese, at best, as we know, is sending a raven to Rhaenyra saying, "A son for a son," and likely putting the more dirty details on Mysaria to organize since she is in King's Landing. This also means that what we see Daemon do in King's Landing with his crime hoodie was likely done by Mysaria herself or a stooge, as Daemon showing up personally is a massive risk that didn't need to be taken. After all, had the Gold Cloak decided it would have been easier to capture Daemon instead of sneaking into the Red Keep and killing one of the greatest fighters in the realm at the time, then Daemon would have been in a very precarious situation. I know he was told about this guard personally, not having a high opinion on the Hightowers, but still, needlessly risky. Also, in the books, Blood wasn't a current member of the Gold Cloaks, but a former member who was fired for beating a horde to death in a drunk rage. Yeah, nice guy. Now, while we don't know who Blood and Cheese were sent to kill, Aemond himself was never mentioned as a target for them in the books. Instead, Aegon is theorized to have been the chosen target, but was too difficult to get to because the Kingsguard protected him. So instead, they settled on killing one of his sons. I actually think changing it from Aegon to Aemond being the target is perfectly reasonable. Not only would there be more of a blood feud with Aemond because he killed Lucerys, but also Aemond is easily the bigger threat. Killing Aegon would be a blow because he's a dragon rider in his own right, but Aemond rides the most ferocious dragon that any of the Targaryens have at this point. Also, he's the better fighter, and if you did kill Aegon, that would just mean that Aemond's next in line and he's the claimant to the throne. Getting back to the enacting of the plan of Blood and Cheese, they were also much smarter about it. Helaena and her kids, while not protected by the Kingsguard, would still be difficult to get to. So, they snuck into the Hand's Tower, which is less defended, and entered Queen Alicent's room, where they bound her and killed her handmaiden. They then waited for Helaena, as it was custom for her and her kids to visit before bed. And as they entered, Blood and Cheese killed the guards and seized her. In the books, Helaena had 3 children, 1 daughter and 2 sons. The other son was cut even before his brother was in the show. Once captured, Blood and Cheese forced her to pick one of them to die. She offered her own life but was denied that choice, and when they threatened to kill everyone and rape all the women, including her 6-year-old daughter. In the end, she chose to pick her youngest child. Why is unknown. Some say it's because the eldest was Aegon's heir, others say because the youngest one was less aware and couldn't understand what was happening, so may suffer less. Though it mattered little, as in response, Blood killed her eldest son by cutting off his head in one swift motion with his sword. Personally, I prefer the book versions of events far more. It portrays Helaena as a much more loving and caring mom in a way, as she offers not only a fucking necklace, but her life itself. Blood and Cheese are looked as less incompetent because they don't just let go of the queen and turn to then kill her son, giving her an opportunity to just scoop up her daughter and run away. And also, I get that she is, how do I put this politically? On the spectrum. But I don't think that is a great justification on why she doesn't scream for anyone to help her, but instead powerworks for almost a minute at least in the show, going into her mother's room where she is riding Kristen Cole's rod, sits down in a corner and simply calmly says, "They killed the boy." Yeah, fuck off with that bullshit. If there was no better source material, I would call this stupid. But since there is source material that is leaps and bounds above what this shit is, I will instead call it what it actually is, retarded. And that's it. If you want a full review of this episode, make sure to subscribe to my channel, as I plan on having a discussion on this episode scene by scene with my good friend DJ Fella. He has not read the books, I am a book snob, so we'll hopefully have very different ideas on how these played out. Until then though, be safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.